Find out what it takes to be a master of disguise. And if we can compete with nature's real-life transformers. We're counting down the top 10 most extreme disguises in the animal kingdom and comparing them with our own attempts at cunning camouflage. You just won't believe your eyes when you see what happens when disguise is taken to the most extreme.
Earth is a planet of extremes. Extreme places. And extreme animals. But some animals are more extreme than others. Join us as we count down to find the most unusual and the most extraordinary on Animal Planet's The Most Extreme. Number 10.
Our search for the most extreme disguises on the planet begins in one of the most extreme environments. Hiding high in the Himalayas is number 10 in the countdown. The snow leopard. The snow leopard loves the high life. It can be found at over 16,000 feet, making it the highest living cat on Earth. But the snow leopard couldn't survive without some really cunning camouflage. That's why it spends most of its time posing as a big, furry rock. On the trails of the Himalayas, leopard skin is the most fashionable form of disguise. But on the catwalks of Paris, fake furs are all about getting noticed. We've tailored all sorts of animal camouflage into fashion statements. So how does a leopard manage to keep such a low profile? The answer lies in its incredible fur. Take away those spots, and you're left with the easily recognizable shape of a hunting cat. But if your fur is exactly the same color as your environment, you blend in perfectly. The trouble is, the snow leopard's environment isn't all one color. And that's why the leopard has its spots. They disrupt the outline of the leopard, making it blend into the background. But spots make one man really stand out from the crowd. Tom Leopard is completely covered in leopard spot tattoos. For the past 15 years, Tom's been the only leopard living wild in Scotland. This isn't part of a disguise. It's a lifestyle choice. Despite his distinct lack of fur, he enjoys a rugged, reclusive lifestyle, just like a real leopard. A weekly hunt to the shop provides him with his favorite meal and all the supplies any leopard would ever need. Unfortunately, there are very few shops in the Himalayas, so this leopard will never find cans of baked varal. To catch these extremely athletic mountain sheep, the snow leopard has to rely on its excellent disguise and feline cunning. All it takes is one unsuspecting varal to step into pouncing range. The snow leopard is the top predator in the Himalayan death zone. The splash of red and the smell of blood destroy the leopard's careful camouflage, so it eats quickly. The fresh kill is starting to attract unwanted attention for a creature that loves being invisible. The snow leopard's extreme disguise means that while it's seldom seen, it's always spotted.
Number 9.
Disguising the human voice can be tricky. Even our most famous ventriloquist can come across a little wooden.
Our new picture. Well, I congratulate you on your courage. I disagree with you, Charlie. For I can say with complete confidence that our new picture, well, it will sell itself. Down the river. No, Charlie. It's a picture with plenty of B.O. And he doesn't mean box office.
But number 9 in the countdown is no dummy. It's the best impersonator in the Australian rainforest. Meet the superb lyrebird. Nothing is better at disguising its voice than a male lyrebird who's looking for a mate. He builds himself a stage and then starts his crazy karaoke. His favorite hits include adaptations of over 20 different bird calls. He's so good, even the real kookaburras are fooled. But the lyrebird's repertoire also includes cameras. And now, a camera with a motor drive. And, you guessed it, a car alarm. And now the sounds of a chainsaw. The reason for this incredible mimicry is that the male with the most complex love song will attract the most females. But far from the forests of Australia, there is one man with a voice as versatile as a lyrebird. A man who boasts a collection of over 10,000 vocalizations. Michael Winslow is celebrated for his side-splitting sound effects.
Start it up!
Nancy, are you ready?
Although Winslow and the lyrebird both practice for years to perfect their vocalizations, it's the lyrebird that definitely picks up the most chicks.
We've seen through the disguises of our first 2 contenders, but coming up are crafty cross-dressers and bare-faced liars when we look behind the mask and reveal the ugly truth. Coming up next on Animal Planet's The Most. Number 8.
Out in the Arctic Circle, a good disguise is the difference between life and death. Blowing in to number 8 in the countdown is the Arctic fox. Its cunning costume is a real lifesaver, keeping it toasty warm even when temperatures fall to 110 degrees below zero. But the real key to staying alive out here is the color of its coat. The white camouflage increases the fox's chances of a successful hunt and decreases the chances of it becoming the hunted. In winter, a hungry polar bear would kill and eat the Arctic fox. So the fox has to stay far enough away to keep out of trouble, and yet close enough to be able to clean up the leftovers from the polar bear's kill. In this frozen land, being able to disguise yourself as a snowdrift is a huge advantage when following in the footsteps of a polar bear. But most of us would need more than just camouflage if we met a hungry bear of any kind.
Can I get you a drink? Yeah, okay. Let's get you a drink.
This is no ordinary bear. It's been constructed by Robert Devine and his team from Anatomorphic Special Effects, who disguise humans for Hollywood movies and TV commercials. But it takes more than just foam rubber, latex, fiberglass, and fur to make a good disguise, as Robert explains.
To get all the bells and whistles running at the same time, there's a suit performer that is required, and there are 5 radio performers to get all of the components running. We metamorphosize people. It's like magic. It's a transformation to build these bears out of people. It's really a wild way to make a living, if you ask me.
Back in the Arctic, there's been more than one transformation. The snow has melted, the fox has a new family, and a new fur coat. The white winter weight coat disappeared when the fox molted, thanks to hormonal changes in response to the longer hours of daylight. Now the whole family wears their lightweight summer coats, and it's no coincidence that their new colors are great camouflage. It's this coat of many colors that lets the crafty Arctic fox sneak in to number 8 in the countdown.
So far, we've been tricked by a turncoat, serenaded by a sneak, and stuck between a rock and a hard spot. But coming up, we lift the lid on nature's master of camouflage. That's next on Animal Planet's The Most Extreme. Number 7.
Sometimes when you're looking for contenders in our countdown of extreme disguises, you have to get down and dirty. On the Pacific island of Vanuatu, disguise is a messy business when men prepare to glorify the power of the animal that's number 7 in the countdown. This animal-inspired imitation is part of a dance that tells how all the fishes in the sea were once saved from a very hungry shark, thanks to the intervention of our next contender, the sea snake. The black and white stripes of the sea snake are certainly distinctive, and yet they can also play clever tricks if you know how to shake your tail. By weaving through the water, the high contrast tail generates an optical illusion, creating the impression that the snake is moving in the opposite direction to where it's heading. That means a hungry predator may be tempted to attack the snake's rear end. This gives the snake the option to flee with only damage to its tail, or to turn and fight back. There are very few animals in the sea brave enough to take on a sea snake. This species is related to the cobra and has teeth that can inject particularly powerful nerve toxins. But there is one fish that's capitalized on the snake's bold designs and natural warning system. Meet the banded snake eel, a fish disguised as a snake. By looking and moving like a snake, this eel uses false advertising to keep predators at bay. It's a remarkably effective disguise, especially for an eel whose mark is worse than its bite. But sea snakes aren't the only ones left seeing double. We've all been fooled by famous mimics. Although Adolf Hitler was all over Europe during World War II, some historians claim that it wasn't always the Fuhrer. It's thought that many world leaders employed body doubles as a decoy. Even today, some people can make a living as a look-alike.
Morning, how are you?
Brent Mendenhall ran a construction business in Missouri until one day...
They say everyone has a face double or a twin. It's just that mine is a politician who some people say is the most powerful man on earth.
Brent now earns a living by impersonating George W. Bush.
The first time I saw a picture of George W. Bush was in Time magazine in May of '99. And yes, I was very surprised when I saw his picture how much we looked alike. I almost thought it was a picture of myself in the magazine. I still consider myself to be a normal, average American. I do have to pay parking tickets, I do pay taxes, and very few people give me a free meal or anything like that. Probably the best perk of the job is just getting to meet a cross-section of Americans all across the country as I work.
Hey, good. Nice to see you too. You look a lot like him.
Well, thanks, I appreciate that.
You look more presidential, actually.
He looks pretty real. He's a little thinner. I can tell he's thinner.
So from there, I thought, it's a Bush. Yeah, real surprised.
You might want to ask to switch places.
Oh well, maybe so, but no, I'm happy where I'm at, just being a Midwesterner.
While the sea snake also manages to stand out from the crowd, our next contender came up with camouflage long before the military.
Number 6.
Today, every soldier knows how to use camouflage to hide from enemy eyes. But our next contender's been practicing this branch of disguise for longer than any army. Down on the sea floor, you'll find a veteran campaigner of camouflage. Hiding away at number 6 in the countdown is the spider crab. This crustacean keeps its movements classified as it hides under its homemade canopy. So it's no wonder that it's commonly called the camouflage crab. Armed with pincers, it trims pieces of plant and then fastens them to tiny hairs on its legs and back. It's a cunning system that works more like Velcro than glue. The chewed ends of the seaweed stick on to the hook-like body hairs. But what makes the crab really extreme is that it changes cover when it changes environments. The crab uses its disguise to keep out of sight of its enemies. It's a clever strategy, and yet only 100 years ago, military strategists could have learned a lot from the camouflage crab. Modern soldiers select their camouflage to fit in with specific landscapes, just like the crab. And these designs disguise both people and their military vehicles. But what's really surprising is just how long it took for military camouflage to really take off. Before World War I, military uniforms were bright and colorful. On a modern battlefield, it would be like wearing a brightly painted bullseye. Back then, colorful uniforms didn't matter because the weapons they used were wildly inaccurate. Why wear camouflage and try to hide if you couldn't hit anything unless it was standing right in front of you? But even today's most elaborately disguised soldier is no match for this crab. After all, what commando can eat his own camouflage when his rations run low?
The camouflage crab may be cunning, but it's still only number 6 in the countdown. Because coming up, we rustle up some even more extreme disguises.
All right, hold it right there. You're covered. And don't make any fast moves, especially toward that television dial.
That's next on Animal Planet's The Most Extreme.
Our countdown's heading out west on the trail of the most wanted disguises on the planet. That's because the next contender uses a gimmick that comes straight from a Hollywood Western.
Just seen a man shot out of his saddle at a full gallop. 2 men bit the dust falling from high rocks, and my horse was shot out from under me, which was a mighty close call. And yet, not one single person was hurt in all this furious violence.
Years ago in pictures, horses were tripped to make them fall. But today, horses like this one, trained by owner Hal Needham, respond to the pull of a rein and fall on cue. Now, if you think I was riding that falling horse, you're wrong. I was waiting safely behind this big rock when Hal Needham rolled out of sight of the camera and came out shooting. We were dressed alike, so when I ran into the road on top of the hill, you were fooled. And this unbelievable fall, 35 feet straight down, were executed by men very much alive, who want very much to keep on living.
Our next contender also wants to keep on living. And that's why it has a disguise that could even teach these cowboys a trick or two. Sliding in to number 5 in the countdown are the hog-nosed snakes. Common throughout America, these little reptiles aren't venomous, so they've had to come up with an extreme stunt to keep them out of trouble. A little kitten can spell big trouble for a hog-nosed snake. So the first part of its disguise is to act tough and take it like a snake. But if that doesn't work, the snake puts on a show that would impress any Hollywood stuntman. It fakes its own death. The snake just doesn't play dead, it smells dead too. It emits such a foul stench that even flies are fooled. Once the danger's past, the snake returns to life. But in the past, some humans weren't so lucky. Until relatively recently, doctors lacked the equipment to be 100% sure that their patient had passed away. In the 19th century, premature burial was such a grave concern that alarms were fitted into the coffins to be activated by the nearly departed. The paranoia of premature burial continues today, with a coffin alarm patent being issued as recently as 1984. However, the chances of anyone actually using the alarm are remarkably small, thanks to modern embalming techniques. If the hog-nosed snake is the ultimate stuntman, our next contender has the costume department all sewn up.
Number 4.
With the arrival of spring in the forest, dedicated followers of fashion know that it's time to change into the new season's trends. That's why the caterpillar crawls into number 4 in the countdown. If it doesn't keep up with the latest woodland style, it'll become a real fashion victim. That beige suit has to go, because in these forests, the critics are unforgiving. Luckily, the caterpillar keeps its wardrobe right up to date by casting off its skin at least 4 times. Each molt gives it more room to grow and lets it color coordinate with its environment. Caterpillars are number 4 in the countdown because their extreme fashion sense leads to some extraordinary disguises. This caterpillar's gone for the grunge look and disguised itself as a bird dropping. The idea is to make yourself look anything but appetizing. The only trouble is that bird droppings don't move. That's why another caterpillar is dressed to kill. The South American snakehead caterpillar disguises itself as a snake, complete with antennae that flicker in and out like a forked tongue. For caterpillars, disguise is all about pretending to be something you're not. Humans that do the same thing are sometimes called spies. Espionage is a shadowy world full of deception. But visit the International Spy Museum in Washington, D.C., and you can learn some tricks of the trade. Peter Ernest is the museum director and has on display cleverly concealed Cold War weapons. You can see a gun disguised as a glove, a cigarette case, a cigarette lighter, and even a flashlight.
Keep in mind that most of those devices are defensive in nature. Let's take the lipstick gun as an example. If you had the lipstick gun right now and you tried to shoot me, I don't know that your chances would be very good. Frankly, it's very hard to take an object that small and hit much of anything beyond about 3 yards, 4 yards. What it did give the agent who carried it was some sort of defensive device, so that if they were in a tight spot, and perhaps by maiming or possibly killing someone, they might have a chance to escape. It gave them some means of affecting the situation.
Caterpillars may not carry concealed weapons like human spies, but they do have one final trick that would make even James Bond jealous. Caterpillars can change not only their clothes, but their bodies, thanks to the wonders of metamorphosis. As it creates its cocoon, the caterpillar erases its old identity. Caterpillars are number 4 in the countdown because their whole life cycle is dedicated to disguise. Even the cocoon looks like a leaf, but it's still fully aware of its environment. After 2 weeks of hiding, the caterpillar finally has a chance to leave its shadowy past behind forever.
So far, we've seen bugs in disguise, snakes that tell lies, and crabs that surprise. But you won't believe your eyes when you see the sneaky seaweed that's coming up next on Animal Planet's The Most Extreme. Number 3.
The next contender in our countdown of extreme disguises could have come straight from the nightmares of the earliest European explorers. Back then, the sea was thought to be full of strange creatures, like the terrifying dragons that appeared on the maps and charts of the time. And believe it or not, one of those sea monsters still lives off the coast of Australia. It's just that it's so well disguised that we seldom see it. Coming in at number 3 in the countdown is the leafy sea dragon. Its camouflage is so convincing that it even fools fish. The sea dragon's body is designed for deception. Those long, leafy limbs have no other function apart from camouflage. Unlike the dragons of ancient mythology, this strange fish is no monster. It's actually a tiny cousin of the seahorse, and is a threat only to small crustaceans. Powered by transparent fins, it stealthily glides through the water. It uses its snout like a vacuum cleaner, feeding on animals that are literally sucked in by the dragon's leafy costume. But as Christy Forsgren from the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California explains, the sea dragon's most extreme deception involves some really unusual behavior.
The sea dragons also have an additional trick of disguise, which is actually the males that become pregnant with the embryos. When the male sea dragon is ready to accept eggs, he throws his disguise and his tail becomes red and swollen, which would make him more noticeable to other animals in the ocean, but also to his mates. When the eggs are embedded onto the underside of his tail, algae will grow over top of the eggs, further camouflaging him while he is pregnant.
But the sea dragon isn't the only one going undercover as a woman to protect the innocent. These men are dressing as dames in the name of the law. They're members of the New York City Police Department's very own Dragnet Squad, which kept city streets safe in the 1950s.
Oh, yes.
By masquerading as women, the officers fooled an average of 5 criminals each day.
Oh, yes.
The sea dragon's arresting behavior may be more than a lifestyle choice, but it's still only number 3 in our countdown of most extreme disguises.
Number 2.
Sometimes the best way to stay out of trouble is to keep really, really still. But to see the ultimate wooden performance, you just have to visit the Los Angeles Natural History Museum Insect Zoo, as curator Kelly Walker explains.
What I have here is a Vietnamese walking stick. This is one of the 1,000 different species of walking sticks in the world. Walking sticks are nocturnal, so most of the time during the day they sit very still. They try and look like a branch or a tree, so they sit on the bark and they barely move at all, if at all, to protect themselves from things like birds that might want to eat them. So they do most of their eating with the leaves that we have in here at night.
But these insects are number 2 in the countdown, because once the stick was an ant. This is actually the juvenile form of the giant prickly walking stick. But since it'll take 3 months to become giant and prickly, it has a different disguise. Ants are notoriously nasty, so the baby walking stick takes advantage of that bad reputation by mimicking the way an ant looks and moves. The transformation from baby to adult is extreme. With its twiggy tail and leafy legs, the adult giant prickly walking stick takes on a new life as a dead branch. Back in the 50s, one man managed to transform his life even more than a walking stick. Ferdinand Waldo de Mera was an imposter who pretended to be so many people that his life story was turned into a movie.
Starring Tony Curtis as the great imposter in the true story that makes fiction seem tame by comparison.
Well, you can't be Ben Stone.
I can't?
An ex-army warden should be fat, 50, and ugly as sin.
For the prison warden had himself served time. The Navy surgeon, cited for 19 operations, had never been to medical school.
What's that?
Now, sir, you want me to have that tooth out, don't you?
Yes, I do.
The real de Mera was unmasked several times, but the great imposter just kept moving on to the next impersonation to feed his desire to become a hero. But for the walking stick, a good disguise feeds much more than just its ego.
We've seen the 9 contenders. They're the best of the best. Only one animal is a more extreme disguising machine. It's number 1, and it's coming up next on Animal Planet's The Most. Number 1.
To find the animal that's number 1 in our countdown of extreme disguise, you have to search the bottom of the sea. These tentacles belong to the ultimate animal transformer, the octopus. It's number 1 in the countdown because it can change shape, color, and skin texture in less than a second, which is really helpful when there's a hungry shark around. This remarkable disguise is thanks to thousands of tiny pigment cells in the octopus's skin. By expanding and contracting the cells, the octopus can create the necessary colors for the complete camouflage. The beauty of the octopus disguise is more than skin deep. If its camouflage fails, there's another countermeasure in the octopus's bag of tricks. Humans can't create an inky smokescreen like the octopus, but professional disguise artists have other tricks that up until recently have been classified top secret. Antonio Mendez was the CIA's head of disguise, and he's the first agent to be given permission to share some of the tricks of his trade.
You have to move people clandestinely if you're going to do espionage. You don't do it from an armchair in Washington, D.C. or in New York. You do it in the field. And in order to do it, you have to move people invisibly. And you do it with documents and you do it with disguise. So you change their identities. You try to have them blend in so they're not seen. And the difference between the real spies and those you see in the motion pictures is the real ones, you want to make them into the little gray person, you know. Really uninteresting, sometimes even ugly, so that people won't want to stare at them. First time I did it in the field was in Karachi. We went down to the local bazaar and bought all the clothing that you would wear if you were a Pakistani, and I put all these clothes on. I rolled on the ground to soil my clothes and make sure that I was scruffy enough. And when I first went out on the street, you have this rush of adrenaline, but also you have a sense of power, because in fact you have invisibility, you know, the cloak of invisibility, and it's an amazing feeling.
There is one octopus that takes the cloak of invisibility to the extreme. Meet the mimic octopus. It's #1 in the countdown because it can use disguise not only to look the part, it seems to be able to act the part as well. And it's got marine biologists asking questions. Is the mimic octopus really trying to swim like a flounder? And could this be an attempt to mimic the shape and color of a sea snake? Is this a mimic octopus, or is it a deadly lionfish? No one knows how or why this octopus is capable of such extreme mimicry. All we can tell for certain is that when it comes to disguise, the mimic octopus really is the most extreme.
Up next on The Experience.